Hello everyone, my name is Sniping is Fun, and I welcome you to a quick little thought video I wanted to do, about E3 2021. I know it's been a few weeks since E3 has went down, and a lot of people have got their thoughts out, their impressions, and all that well back a few weeks ago when it actually happens. I'm late to the party, but I still wanted to give my quick 2 cents and my thought process on E3 of this year, and just like what I liked, what I didn't like, and what I thought was good, and so on and so forth. But quick little thoughts, quick impressions, my thoughts, and whatever about E3 this year. I didn't really watch all of it, but I did see the highlights after for most of it. The only ones I really kind of watched were like Microsoft and Nintendo, and that's really telling because when it comes down to it this year, I do think that E3 2021 was more of an average E3. We've had a lot of great E3s in the past. A lot of E3s that are much better and have been much better and are considered much better than what this year's was. But unlike most people, because there's some people out there that like totally dog on this year's E3, and I'm not gonna go there because I really don't think this year's E3 was that bad, but it definitely wasn't in like that high leveled E3 like we've seen in the past, like those really good E3s. But it's not like a really crappy E3s. We've had a bunch of E3s that are really crappy for the most part, and there's been a lot of E3s that were worse than this year's. But overall, I do think this year was an okay E3. It wasn't the greatest E3, but it was an okay E3. Mostly because I think the only two companies that really, had anything was the main two companies that showed off their games, systems type stuff. Was Microsoft's conference and Nintendo's Direct. That's the only two that really struck me as interesting. Like when it comes to all the smaller companies, the indie showcase they had, that was pretty cool. There's a bunch of cool indie games coming out. That's definitely something. If you're into like indie gaming, there's a bunch of cool indie games coming out on all different platforms for the next year plus. Ubisoft's Direct or Ubisoft's conference was okay. They had some interesting stuff like the new Mario Rabbids game, which I'm still questioning to this day. Why isn't it just a crossover between Mario and Rayman? Why does Ubisoft hate Rayman so much? Why can't it be a Mario Rayman crossover? I would have thought if they did the first one, maybe he would have been like in a sequel, and they still don't have him unless he's be like DLC or something. But the first game was pretty cool, and this one looks like it's an improvement. They showed more stuff, DLC for like Assassin's Creed, how, and overall Ubisoft had their own little conference, and it was interesting and fun, and it was informative. More stuff on Far Cry 6. That DLC with like you play as all the villains from past games like Voss. That sounds pretty damn cool. And Ubisoft was generally good. Capcom really didn't have too much of anything. It was an average at best conference. Take-Two can kiss my ass because Take-Two didn't even show jack all, and they had that stupid like conference with all the people talking and whatnot and about stuff that does not need to be discussed at E3. E3 is to show off your video game systems, your video games, to actually have content that's in the video game realm. What they talked about had nothing to do with that, so I have no idea why they were there when they had no games to show and they wasted all our time on that, which I never even watched that. I heard about that and said, yep, I'm not paying attention to that. And Square Enix had a couple interesting things to show. That new Final Fantasy, like USA kind of thing, the one that's kind of like a remake of the original, it looks okay, but it doesn't look great. It really doesn't. I think when they try to westernify like Final Fantasy a little too much, it gets in the way for what made the series beloved in the first place, more often than not. And I'm thinking it's going to be an okay game at best. I think more fans of the Final Fantasy series are interested in the Final Fantasies 1 through 6, like they take like the pixel art update, remake type, remaster type stuff. That's pretty cool, and I'm hoping that comes to Switch. So Square had pretty interesting stuff. And then obviously Sony wasn't anywhere to be found at the E3 this year, and obviously probably because they all the issues they're having with the PlayStation 5 and the fact that it's still not in store for people to get. So whatever the reason, Sony didn't go to E3 this year was their own reasoning, and it's, I think, going to hurt them in the long run, but probably not by much. They still have a chance to get a comeback, but nothing too big. Like, not a big loss there, but at the same time, this is like the first E3 outside the whole 2020 COVID thing last year, which there really wasn't no E3. It was canceled, and other companies just did their own little thing. That really, to only one of the big three weren't there. Only two of the big three companies, Nintendo and Microsoft, were at E3 this year. That's crazy. I don't know what other companies were at E3. I don't know if Activision showed anything off, because like outside of like the main two and then the little side ones like Ubisoft, Square, and Capcom and the indie thing, I really didn't pay attention to like anything else. And then when it comes to the big two, some people say like, these are the two highlights: Microsoft with the Xbox One, and then the whole big Nintendo Direct. Those were the highlights for E3 this year, bar none. The top two conferences, the top two showcases, was E3 for Nintendo and E3 for Microsoft. Some people say Microsoft's better, some people say Nintendo's better. If I had to pick between them, I would easily say Nintendo had probably more bang for my buck, type conference, bang for my buck, like showcase, because after that show was done, I already had, like, for me, I already have a bunch of Switch games I want to buy, and they just added to the pile there. Xbox is slowly growing, because like I said, I just got back into Xbox the end of last year. I haven't had an Xbox since the OG one. I never had a 360 or an Xbox One, but I bought myself an Xbox Series S, and I'm enjoying it. It's my return to Xbox, but it's a slow build. There's games I'm looking forward to on Xbox, and definitely their conference, their showcase, definitely highlighted that a lot, because a lot of those games are coming to Game Pass. So that's definitely a big major plus for me, because I have Game Pass. That was what drew me back to Microsoft, because Game Pass was just way too enticing. But at the same time, the Switch and Nintendo's conference, they definitely had more bang for my buck, because I already had a bunch of Switch games I wanted to buy for, before E3. Now I have a bunch more. This generation, the ninth generation, the Switch is still running it for me. Xbox is slowly building up, and as much of a PlayStation fan as I am, I'm playing the waiting game until they do a remodel of PlayStation 5, and hopefully it comes into the store so someone outside of the scalpers can get the damn thing. But me, as more of a Nintendo PlayStation guy, I'm sitting out PlayStation right now this generation, because, you can't really get one as easy right now. There's really nothing on the PlayStation 5 that's really enticing me right now. But Xbox is slowly building itself up. Nintendo's running ninth generation, like 55 million selling consoles and selling, and the rumors of the Switch Pro model, which will probably be like the PS4 Pro, like a mid-generation upgrade, probably within a year or two. The Switch still has like 4 or 5 years left. Nintendo has, they have other announcements they haven't announced yet, but a lot of the stuff they announced more information on Shin Megami Tensei 5. They showed off a new Advance Wars, a remake from Way Forward on 1 and 2. That was probably my biggest mark out, like almost crying big moment of the conference, was a new or semi-new Advance Wars from Way Forward, the creators of like Shantae and whatnot. And it's pretty much, in my opinion, Intelligent Systems' way of, and Nintendo's way of, let's build interest in this franchise so we can bring it back and Intelligent Systems can make a new game. But I'm definitely looking forward to that. They showed more the Danganronpa collection coming to Switch. They showed Cruise and Blast is coming to Switch. They showed more information on Breath of the Wild sequel, which definitely looks a little bit, looks fun. And a bunch of other stuff. New Mario Party, more information on Mario Golf. Kazuya's in Smash. It was just like thing after thing after thing. And it was a fun little conference. It definitely was the most hype in terms of announcement to announcement to announcement and stuff that interested me. Microsoft had a lot of announcements too. Like I said, about pretty much 3/4, 5/6 of their conference, their big games they were announced this year are coming to Game Pass. And I'm definitely interested in Psychonauts 2. The first game I played, I never got around to finishing it, but I remember playing that back in the day, and that was definitely a game I played on the OG Xbox. And I did recently, within the last year or so, pick it up on PlayStation 4. And definitely need to get on that, because I have a bunch of games I bought on that I still haven't played yet. But Psychonauts is a freaking fun game, and I'm looking forward to the sequel. And then the Atrian Odyssey, or whatever the heck it's called, Elysian Trail or something. That 16-bit, 32-bit looking RPG they had there, that 2D one, that was enticing. And then obviously Halo Infinite, returning to Halo. I haven't played a Halo since 3. No, Reach. I think ODST 3, regular 3, and Reach. And that wasn't even games I owned. I played it with my cousin on his Xbox. Played those games. The last one I owned was 2. Because, like I said, OG Xbox was the last time I owned an Xbox. But that was definitely what was the biggest enticing moment about their conferences. And most of their games are coming over to it. That snowboarding game, Steeped, however, I thought it was going to be an Amped 4. No, but it looks fun. It's not no SSX either, but I can manage. It's no freaking 1080 snowboarding, but I'll manage. It looks pretty fun. I like good, fun snowboarding games. And they had a bunch of other little things here and there. So, like I said, those were, in my opinions, the two breakout conferences of E3 were Nintendo's and Microsoft's. Microsoft with the big use of Game Pass Ultimate. A lot of stuff's coming to it. And Nintendo just having announcement after announcement, information after information, then the Treehouse event showing all this stuff, and a bunch of games I'm looking forward to by the end of this year, from Shin Megami Tensei 5 to No More Heroes and Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp and everything. I just think those two conferences were pretty much what stood out this entire E3, because everyone else was either average at best or crappy. So that's my thought process on E3. That's my thoughts on this year's E3. Let's hope next year and forward goes a little bit better. Maybe next year we'll have all 3 9th generation systems there and Sony will join Nintendo and Microsoft. Who knows? But it was an okay E3. It wasn't great, but it definitely was an improvement over not having anything last year in 2020. I just hope it's a slow build, or I'm hoping not a slow build, but I'm hoping it's a build to something better for a future E3. And that's about it. That's my thoughts. My name is Sun. Peace. Please subscribe if you want to. Have a lovely day, and I'll see you later in the next video. Bye, everyone.